Phillip Nicholas, who's a librarian for the State Department, Department of the State, Maryland, and also a professional genealogist for Genealogy Detective Caribbean. That's fascinating. I've got some
Yeah.
questions about that. And also a research fellow at the AI Collaboratory. And so we're really excited to hear your discussion on urban renewal and generative AI, which I think is going to be really useful for us, our students, and again, thinking about how we can continue to uplift our collections and to use them for computational data. So Philip, if you need to share your screen, you are
Yes.
more than welcome to do that. And
Oh,
thank you so much.
oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Holly. All right, so I'll go ahead. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Phillip Nicholas, and I am a librarian, genealogist, and historian. And I'm also a recent graduate from the University of Maryland, College Park, the Information School, where I graduated with a Master in Library and Information Science. I'm going to give a brief introduction on a project I worked on while in graduate school in Professor Richard Marciano's graduate course, where we analyzed the impact of urban renewal on a historical Black community in Asheville, North Carolina, Southside Asheville, using computational archival science. All right. In this graduate course, there was 6 students in the Master of Library and Information Science program at the University of Maryland College Park. And then we also had Professor Marciano. Prior to taking this course, most of us had some to minimal experience with computational archival science and with no background in computer science and IT. I personally had experience working with the Maryland State Archives Legacy of Slavery data sets, which you saw in the previous presentations. We each had various interdisciplinary backgrounds that we were bringing to the course. Some of us were prior history majors, arts history, and English literature. And for this project, we were separated into 3 groups of 2. And our initial work began with manually searching the historical deeds from Buncombe County in North Carolina. All right. Before I get into our process, I would like to play a video that provides a historical overview of this project.
A few years ago, when Jane Edison and I decided to open up Grind, we wanted there to be a coffee shop, a place that people could come and enjoy and relax, but a place where people could come together. But not only a place that people could come together, but a place that people could remember. Remember what was here. Remember what existed. So that somehow we would be able to stand on the shoulders of people that had done so much more with so much less against all odds. So over time, we thought about what we could do. And I'm so glad that I was able to connect with Miss Priscilla and Mr. Gilliam and Mr. Gregg, so that we can figure out how we can honor the history in ways that maybe I hadn't seen before, but these streets have already seen it before. And so with the help of a grant from Arts ABL, support from Buncombe County, Black Wall Street was able to connect with Miss Priscilla to pull together this history, which is just a portion of what existed here.
I'm just so overwhelmed. This confirms that my work, our work, was not in vain. And for me, I vision that this will be a movement.
When I think about this display, I feel pain. I am a privileged Black person. I was able to I was able to go to whatever college I wanted to go to. I'm able to buy whatever I want to buy. And theoretically, I can live wherever I want to live. But this display is about people who couldn't do that. They didn't have the freedoms that I have. They didn't have the resources that I have. But they had much more heart. They have much more heart. And it's a shame that a government-approved project would wipe out a neighborhood only to benefit another. By the time of urban renewal, Southside was the city's premier black business district, surrounded by a large residential neighborhood. At over 400 acres, the urban renewal project here was the largest in the southeastern United States. The scale of the devastation here was unmatched. In the East Riverside area, said the late Reverend Wesley Grant, we have lost more than 1,000 homes, 6 beauty parlors, 5 barbershops, 5 filling stations, 14 grocery stores, 3 laundromats, 8 apartment houses, 7 churches, 3 shoe shops, 2 cabinet shops, 2 auto body shops, 1 hotel, 5 funeral homes, 1 hospital, and 3 doctor's offices. This neighborhood had a history that existed before urban renewal, and urban renewal wiped it out.
All right, so as you can see from that video, urban renewal really did devastate the community, and even much more so that we saw within the data, even more than what he described in the video. All right, so as I previously mentioned, we began exploring the Buncombe County Register of Deeds from primarily the 1960s to the 1970s, when the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville, also known as HACA, began purchasing the housing and businesses of Southside Asheville. These records have been digitized and they are available to access online. And this is the site, how it looks online. And then from there, you'll be able to access the deeds. In this screenshot here is a plaque and or map of a land deed for one of the properties that HACA purchased from an individual who had lived in the south side of Asheville. And as we had continued our research, we found deeds like the one in this example, detailing the name of the occupants, their property, their dates, and how much HACA purchased from the original landowners. Next, then we began recording the information and the data that we found from the Register of Deeds into a Google Sheets, separating the data into different fields, such as the tax value, the name of the modern and historical parcels, so that's the property, the deed book, so where this information was coming from, and the deed page, as well as the date, the names of the grantor and the grantees, the plaque book, as well as the house number, the transfer price and transfer date, and then other additional locational data. In addition, we recorded the amount of money that HACA purchased for each property, and we used a computational tool known as QGIS Pro to plot the historical maps of deeds over a current Google map, and inputting the data from our Google Sheets. Through our finished product, we were able to create an interactive map where researchers can see over time how urban renewal impacted the residents of the community in Asheville. And some of these interactive maps are available to be viewed through this URL address, which I have listed here in the slide. And from this project, we were able to write and publish a paper on our data, as well as and our data was also submitted to a reparation committee in Asheville, North Carolina, to determine if the residents and descendants should be compensated for the loss of property and businesses. So with this computational archival science approach and tools, we were able to apply them to historical records to solve social justice matters. And then I should also say, after graduating, I've continued to use this approach and tools in my day-to-day work. As a reference librarian at the Library of Congress, I created interactive maps using some of the library's collection. So well, at this time, this concludes my part of the introduction, and I will now turn it over to Professor Richard Marciano.
One of the products we had also put together is this web interface to GIS platform that you mentioned. This shows the neighborhood, historical map of all the parcels that were taken in the neighborhood with a number of layers you can click on and off. Let me see here. So if I just turn on these two layers in gray with the black, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, with the black background, it's the historical footprint of all those properties that we recreated based on QGIS and archival maps. And then we also crowdsourced from the PDF, from the scanned documents, we extracted metadata that was never available prior to this study to reveal metadata on people, not just on property transactions, real estate transactions, legal transactions. So the goal was to reveal which individuals were affected, the actors, dates, dollar amounts, and describe the process. So this interactive application does some of that. And as part of an exercise, if students wanted to go back to this, there's a search interface where you can search on two things: historical street names and also on names of people. So if I were to type Ashland, as in Ashland Avenue, it shows you all the properties with names of renters, owners on Ashland. If you recognized yourself or an uncle or aunt or parent or grandparent, you could go and click on one of these, and then the map automatically zooms in to that particular parcel. It's very hard to find this information because the indexing nomenclature is no longer relevant and doesn't map. So it would zoom in onto this property. If you click that parcel, this might be a little hard to read, but it would show you some of the metadata that we made available that wasn't there before on the name of the owner, who purchased that property, an actual appraiser, and then a timeline that documents the origin story of that property. So you'll see who owned it in gray, the first little bubble, starting in 1916, when it was first appraised in 1965, a second appraisal in 1968, a third appraisal a few months later in 1968, and finally in 1969, the transfer of ownership through a deed for the amount of $5,500 on October 23rd, 1969. So those are the kinds of things we revealed. How much was paid for those properties, what happened to those properties and when things happened and who was associated with that. And then we also pulled photos that show up most often in the appraisal documents themselves. And then finally, one last feature, there's a time time bar on the lower left corner. And if I zoom out just a little bit, you can see the whole neighborhood and click through this year by year, and you will see the status of every single house at scale in aggregate. So you can look at, you have a timeline for what happened to a property individually, and then you have a visualization, interactive visualization that allows you to see how the neighborhood, where the neighborhood is moving and at what speed in its entirety, or you can zoom into part of the neighborhood and see that. So if I keep clicking, this is the state of the neighborhood in 1965, just when urban renewal is starting. And you see that yellow means it goes in the appraisal column, that those properties are being valued for potential purchase or acquisition. If I go to 66, you see that there are more appraisals that show up there. And then 68, we start having houses that are where offers are being made. So you have different colors as individual properties transition from an appraisal state to a decision being made, to an offer being made, and to a financial transaction. So this would be a good exercise to familiarize yourselves with the data set, to look at the change of colors in the map as you go through time until our study stops, I think, in 1980. So you'll see the neighborhood evolving, and most of the properties by 1980 have moved into the transfer of deed state. So time permitting, I'm going to go back in a minute and build on the previous presentation and show you a version of ChatGPT. So what we could potentially do if we exercise these newer, untested technologies and apply them to this particular data set. So before we do that, I think I'm going to go into video mode one more time and actually show you how our partner, Priscilla Robinson, who's a resident of the South Side, uses this interface to actually tell stories. And if we try to locate her, she may do that in the video. We type Robinson. Oops, I didn't type that right. I think her grandfather may be here. So this is the property where she lived. I'm going to wind this back to the beginning so that we don't have the colors. Oops, sorry. So if you click on her property, it has numerous pictures of the property. There were a number of buildings. It also reveals she is on one of the appraisal photos, which was a remarkable find as a little girl sitting on the balcony with her relatives. So you have, again, the timeline, what happened, see if I can move that, the timeline of what happened to that property until the transfer of deed. And you see here the owner and all the tenants who live there. So we tried to extract tenants and owners. We'll come back to this record in a second. But more importantly, I thought I would let Priscilla speak about the interface in a much more personal way. So let's see if you can hear this.
I would like to
Can you hear this?
share with you how, well, I actually would like to take you back in time with me. This is very personal, and I would like to show you how personal it is. And then afterwards, Portia will explain or show you how to maneuver through the website. Dr. Lee, would you please put the map on and let's journey back into time.
Mm-hmm. Do you see the map?
Yes, sir. I would like to go to 477 South French Broad. 477 South French Broad is where I was born and it's where I grew up. You previously saw the house. Dr. Lee, would you please bring the house back into visual?
Can you make the screen a little bit bigger?
Better?
Yes. And 477 is, it looks like it's about the fourth or fifth. Yes, I will go over one more, please. Okay, so on the first level is where my family and I lived, and all of those individuals sitting on the porch are my grandmother, my mother, and all of my aunts, and including me. So Portia, at this point in time, would you like to say anything about this picture, or would you rather wait till you maneuver in the website? Okay, I'll continue on my journey. And so my day in this neighborhood was simply is what I'm going to describe. Dr. Lee, would you please take me down the street to Allen Funeral Home? Yes, the funeral home. As a young lady, I would often witness the adults going to the funeral home to view the bodies of those who had passed. And my brother and I, we had a habit, we would also go just to look at the bodies. So one day my brother and I decided to go to Allen's funeral home, and we rang the doorbell just as we saw the adults do. And there was this tall man, and he looked like Mr. Lurk, and he came to the door and he said, "Yes." And we said, "Yes, sir, we come to view the bodies." And he said, "There's no bodies here but mine." And my brother and I, we took running off up the street. So as we ran up the street, we decided to go up Black Street. Dr. Lee, would you take us to Black Street? Black Street at Miss Joan Robinson's house at the corner of Black Street and South French Broad. We often visit just across the street, the Robinsons and the Fosters and the Smiths. They were the largest families on South Side. So the Robinsons was right across the street from our home, and we often visited right across the street and played with the children there. When urban renewal came through and took the houses, took the homes, the Robinsons relocated out of the state of North Carolina. Can we continue to journey on up the street to Miss Louise Moore home?
Miss Moore?
Miss Moore. Okay, well, we can talk about that picture there while you're there. Actually, okay, and we can talk about that one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, yes. Okay, so Miss Sophie Foster, I just mentioned that the Fosters were one of the largest families in the neighborhood, and they actually lived up the street. They too had lots of children, and often we would gather in front of Miss Sophie's house, and we played softball right in the middle of the street. It was so much fun to be in the street playing with other kids, and we would play until the street lights came on. Once the street lights came on, we'd run. You'd hear feet running, trying to get home, because we knew what would happen if the street lights came on and was on too far before we got home. Okay, can we journey on? We're right there at the Fosters. Can we walk about 2 streets up? Okay. We can, don't worry, you can stay there because we're journeying all around the neighborhood. This home, actually, the family, the father of this home, Miss Connie White, her father owned 8 homes on Black Street. He owned enough homes to give each of his children a home. And that is why the street was named Black Street, because a Black man owned at least 8 homes on that street. Okay, Miss Dr. Lee, you can
take me on to another area. Miss Littlejohn. Now, look at this home. Dr. Lee, is it any way that you can enlarge that? Does that home look like it's blighted? Miss Littlejohn. Miss Littlejohn was a sweet little old lady. She made the best cupcakes in the world. You could smell the cupcakes, the smell of it coming out of her home. She was a widow. She could not afford to rebuild her home, even with the incentive of, we'll give you $1 a lot and you can come back and rebuild. She was on fixed income. When she went to the bank, of course, she was denied. Inside the red lines, they automatically knew because of the zip code where she lived. So she couldn't afford to finance to even rebuild. So Miss Littlejohn ended up in the high rise, which is now still in operation on South French Broad. Okay. And the high rise is public housing. Mr. Stanfield's grocery store. Mr. Stanfield was not only a homeowner, he was a business owner. He owned a grocery store. Mr. Stanfield was a great example on how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a committed one. Mr. Stanfield would walk all up and down the street. Peanuts, hot peanuts, get your hot peanuts is what he would holler. Mr. Stanfield and Mrs. Stanfield, he had a wife. They ran the grocery store, a grocery store that my grandfather would so often send me to purchase Biltmore Dairy chocolate milk. And oh boy, was I happy to run up and was I happy to run back down Black Street to 477 South French Broad, because I knew that I would have a big tablespoonful. Okay, let's look at one other, Dr. Lee, before we close out. Miss Louise Moore. Miss Louise Moore used to babysit me. She took care of me when my mother went to work, and as so many of the older women in the community. The young women had to go to work, the older women babysitted, and they taught us how to be young ladies, young men, how to cook, how to clean. Miss Louise Moore made the best green beans, fresh green beans, and cornbread. Wish I had some now. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all I would like to travel today. My legs have gotten very tired. But I would like to tell you that right up the street from where I live was the first church that I ever attended. And I attended there up into my adult life, New Bethel Baptist Church, and it's still in operation today. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your time and your assistance.
Okay, so I thought it was important, since we built this interface, extracted the metadata from the archival records to really show you, for you to get a sense of how personal and how significant these records are when they're narrated in this fashion. So really an important moment. I want to switch now. So this is part of this urban renewal project that Phillip Nicholas worked on and introduced so well. And in the last few months, we thought we would take this content and explore it afresh in the context of some of the things you saw in the second presentation, notably generative AI and large language models. So in the 10-15 minutes remaining, I'll try to give you a little sense of what steps you could take to start exploring this content in that fashion. So let me go back. I have a number of files open here, and I have to find the right one. I'm gonna put this in the background. I'm gonna go back to these instructions, which I will publish later. So we're gonna use something called Notebook LM, which is a Google product, and it's https://notebooklm.google. I'm gonna try to use that live in a few minutes. In this document, I actually have instructions on where to get the files we're going to use in the next manipulation. There are a number of scanned documents from the original records that are saved as PDF files. So there's a Google Drive link. You could download all those files, and we're going to bring them into this Google Notebook LM in a minute. And then the rest of the presentation, I'm going to try to walk you through Google LM and some of the experimentation we started. So these slides, this Google document walks you through you have to create an account, step one. This was using the interface, which we already looked at, the earlier interface. And then you have to go to Notebook LM, create an account, register. It's free, but you have to register, and then you can start interacting with this interface. And very much in a similar way to what Rajesh did, at the very end of this document, I have some of the queries that students used over the summer in a class where we were playing with Notebook LM for the first time with this data. So you could look at some of these queries, try them out, come up with better queries. And let's go to Notebook LM, and then I'll put the query file on the side. I'm going to use like 3 different files. So if you go to notebooklm.google, there are a number of tutorials. They just added new features where you can automatically create a blog with narrated voice and audio from the tool, etc. But if you log into Notebook LM, you can create your first notebook here. So let's try that. And here it says upload sources. So Notebook LM, unlike what Rajesh walked us through, does not work with structured data, with a CSV, comma separated value file, spreadsheet. It only works with text. So you need text files, PDFs. Those can be on your local hard drive. They can be Google Slides. They can be Google Docs. It can be pasted text. And I think more recently, they added the ability to point to a website where you have text, and to also point to a YouTube video where you have the transcript of the video that is your text source. So that's newer. So what I'm going to do is take the files for Priscilla's property, block 53, parcel 1, upload them into Google Notebook. So now we've brought in textual content, and maybe I can uncheck these files. Oh, there it is. And we'll only select a few. So I'm going to select the 3 appraisal files. I'm going to select a HUD relocation document, and I'm going to select a rental file. If we were to look at these files, so I'll pick one of the 3 appraisals. You see that an appraisal file has the address, the name of the owner, and since it's meant to provide a valuation for that property, that's where typically we grab the pictures from. This one's a little dark, but it has a picture of the property with the appraiser, a date of the appraisal, and a valuation made by that appraiser, and the name of the appraiser and a particular date. So what you're going to find are names of people, both agents, appraisal agents, and residents, in this case, owner. Let me Let me use one more. Let's look at a second appraisal file for this property. So same kind of information, different date, different appraisal amount, and we have more detail here. In this instance, they look at the various rental units on the property. There were a number of them, and have much more detailed information on the number of rooms and the square footage and valuation and things of that sort. So I forget, at least seven or eight properties with the pictures that we ended up using in the online GIS, where they were extracted from these appraisal reports. I'm going to show you one more so you have proper context. That's the third appraisal. Again, done at a different date by a different inspector with similar information. And sometimes on these appraisals, it's not just the owner, you will have the name of the renter. And so the people metadata is what we had extracted in that previous thing. Okay, and then last but not least, there's a rental charge document. That's a little hard to read. And these are residents who decided to stay a bit longer after the property was sold, and they were authorized to spend an extra month or two. So you have the names of the tenants and rental agreement forms. So this is a multi-page PDF, but these are all the folks, including Priscilla Robinson's, I think, grandfather, who show up in these files. So these are important documents if we want to reveal the names of the people who were affected. And that falls under the rubric of renters. That's why I selected that. And the very last one is a relocation payment form. So someone was moved to a different location, and there's a record in a document that shows that. So what we essentially did is we loaded all the files for that property, the entire folder of everything that happened, including other documents that Philip described. But specifically for this exercise, in the time remaining, we're going to focus on these 4 documents. What Notebook LM allows you to do is to explore these kinds of documents. And then at any point in time, you can capture the result of, so it uses Google's LLM, large language model, in the background. And at any point in time, you can capture the feedback you get from one of these prompts. They have a mechanism, maybe it's called notes or stickies. You add the feedback to a sticky, and you can create kind of your own board of stickies. And at the very end of the experiment with Notebook LM, you can say, combine all those stickies together and summarize them, link them together, find other things. So it's similar to ChatGPT, but it's for textual documents only, and it's a different navigational experience. So I invite you to play with this free tool. It was useful, and it was the first exposure students had when moving towards playing with large language models and extracting content and metadata. So I'm going to let's start our experimentation here a little bit. I'm going to put see if I can find our other document that has some suggested prompts. There it is. So I will put that on the side. We'll see if we can kind of combine these 2 documents. So haven't played with this in a while. So we might say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you summarize these 5 PDF files? So we're assuming here that this is our first exposure. We have not, we don't know what's in these PDF files. And summarization, whether you trust it or not, is an important feature of these LLMs. So for each, it figures out that there are which 5 documents they are, tells us the document name, and it tries to give us a glimpse of what's inside each of these documents. So the point of this interaction is that perhaps, and the jury's still out, it's very early and we need a lot more experimentation, but perhaps these large language models, tools like Notebook LM, can be useful to help as assistants to help explore documentary or record evidence in this fashion. You can play with these environments and say, I want you to redo the summary and only give me 2 lines or 3 lines, right? Have something that's terser. So there are a lot of ways you can, and there's some really good videos now if you want to get into this. The moment you start interacting with this tool, it also suggests queries. So you can see suggestions here that you could click on and directly. So the point of this exercise, and we have 5 minutes left, I'll just start it. The point of this exercise is to go back to the pop-up window for that particular property in the QGIS online map, see what metadata was actually created through traditional crowdsourcing, and now use Notebook LM to see if we can recreate or extract afresh similar content. And now we have kind of a ground truth way of doing it. We know what the result should be through the earlier mapping interface. So if Notebook LM misses out or misses information or confuses the output or starts making up output, we'll immediately be able to ground truth it and ascertain that kind of information. So let me just start this with a few of these queries. And we want in particular, so if I scroll back in this file, that's the record I'm talking about. Let's see if we can find the names of the appraisers, find the name of the owner, find, and more importantly, the names of the tenants. So I'm going to scroll back to some of our queries. And why don't I try just copying and pasting this? This is one student who kind of created a narrative. So this is his query. You are researching, you are a researcher, let me retype that, looking for information about people contained in these documents. Your present task is to find a list of all the tenants who rented the property. See if I can paste that in. There it is. And fire away. So now it's using those 5 checked boxes, and it comes back with some interesting results, and we can immediately ground truth that. So we see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenants. And in our actual list, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tenants. So we're missing 1 tenant. So it's not accurate in that sense, but it is providing hopefully some more accurate information as to whether or not they rented and which apartment complex within that property they resided in. And again, like the previous demonstration, like previous talk, we may be missing one of the tenants because of subtle variations on how we frame the query and how the information is actually described in the historical PDF records. So you need to know a little bit more. You need to have a little more context, as with the previous demonstration, about what you're looking at in order to name people and the roles they played in a way that allows the prompt to capture the broadest and the most complete record of who is represented in those files. So those are the kinds of things you can do. And the goal would be to see how far we can get. That was the exercise we did a little bit earlier. And what prompt strategies need to be used in order to extract event timeline information. It might be a little harder. And in order to find all those individuals and actors who are in this record. Let me try, I think we're at the end of our presentation time, so I will try one more of these potential queries. I think the issue is that we're asking specifically here about, our prompt was asking specifically about tenants. And the person who was relocated, if we looked at that record, might not be designated in that exact fashion. So I wonder if instead of tenant, we could say people, and that whether, I'll try a variation on this query. I'm going to paste that again. You're a researcher looking for information. Your present task is to find a list of all the people who rented the property. This may not do it, but we'll give it one last try. So we have a different response, and we would have to run that by the ground truth version for this record and see what we obtained. So the exercise, if you'd like to continue this on your own, would be to look at some of these queries that students played with and just kind of fine tune your queries, come up with strategies, see how far you can go to recreate the extracted record that ended up going into the database and being the foundation of the GIS interface. So that's the promise or the power of potentially of these generative AI tools, of being able to do things like this with minimal effort, but of course at your own peril and at your own risk. So that kind of concludes our demonstration. I mentioned earlier the notion of notes. So whenever you get a response, you could save that as a note. So it kind of creates a sticky note, and you can create a whole collection of notes, and then ultimately analyze those notes or do something only on those notes. So it's kind of a multi-tier process. I'm going to make one last comment. So if I pick one of the suggested queries that they provided, comes back with a response. I could also save that as a note. But what you will see inserted in the response are these footnotes. And what this shows you, if you hover above it or if you click it, it gives you the provenance. So it tells you which document it used and which portion of that document it used in order to come up with that response. So depending on how well that's implemented, this could be a very useful feature for kind of trustworthy generative AI, of having some insights as to the process that is being used by this environment. So I will conclude here this presentation, and we will collectively wrap up this today's Datathon. So thank you very much for your interest.